because your pain, all the traumas that you've been through are your superpowers. On
Yep.
the other end of that trauma, when you heal from it, it's such a gift. There's so many
Yep.
gifts in there.
As humans, we experience a wide range of crazy emotions, and these emotions can come up during challenging times that seem to hit us out of nowhere. That's the purpose of this podcast, to teach you how to move through these difficult situations and harness these emotions that we feel to be able to create the life that you want. My name's Nathaniel Burke, and I'm the host of the Emotional Fitness Podcast. I hope you enjoy. All right, Stephanie, thank you so much for being on the show. Really appreciate you taking time here today to meet with me and to share some of the experiences and the wisdom and some of the work you're doing. I'm super excited to hear about it all because you sent me this list of these things that you're doing, and it's really incredible and quite vast. So I'm excited to dive into it and really just extract the wisdom for anybody that, like I said before, is on the outside and that is starting their healing or fitness journey, and how that can relate to them. So maybe do you want to just introduce yourself and a little bit about what you do and the work you're doing right now?
Sure. So my name is Stephanie, and yeah, I dove into so many different modalities of what can heal me in the past few years, because I have been basically was living in a state of extreme depression and pain almost my whole life. And I was still suffering a lot from the traumas that I hadn't healed or cleared. And so I went on this lifelong journey to find how to heal myself. And I think one of the greatest things about my experience, about all of the trauma, is that I get to share with people what works, how
Mm.
to heal from the source, how to feel good in your body, how to be quote unquote normal in your own weird and beautiful, loving way, and not be in suffering from your past. So
Mhm.
yeah, led me on this beautiful journey. And the first thing that I did, that I dove into, was a powerful medicine called Cambo. It is a frog poison, and it comes from the Amazon, Peru.
Wow.
And it basically, yeah, it's similar to ayahuasca, but it is legal, and it doesn't have the hallucinogenics that ayahuasca has. It's just the healing part. It's the purging. So it is a powerful medicine. For me, I struggled with addictions. I struggled with 17 years of drugs, alcohol, and food
Oh,
bulimia, compulsive eating addiction. And so
oh wow.
uh, this medicine I did every couple of months. I did it 3 days in a row. And I started to notice, I also want to say that the power of your will and the wanting to change of your lifestyle is very important. And that's what I really wanted. I had this determination and this will that was like, I will do anything to change my lifestyle. And so that combined with Cambo, I think is a powerful, powerful thing. And so I started to notice that my cravings stopped getting so intense, that I was actually able to, be around people who were partying and say no, which was something I had never done before.
Hmm.
It was a powerful, powerful thing. I wouldn't recommend putting yourself out in those positions. But eventually, after that, I ended up going to AA, and I absolutely hated AA, but for me, it was more around connection. It was around
Mhm.
meeting people who were on similar wavelengths. And after about a year, I was like, you know what? I'm not resonating with this anymore. And I went off on my own journey. And I really do believe that AA is missing a step, which is the power is within you. And
Mhm.
that once we really clear and work on a lot of those traumatizing wounds, we can really begin to make change in our lives, and we reclaim our power back from where we've given it to,
Mhm.
because we are souls, and we can make a difference in our lives. And so, if you are struggling with AA or with addictions and you're in AA, really tune into that message, and don't just do what I did, but really see if that's something that resonates with you, because I am not you and I had different experiences than you, and AA might be exactly what you need. So just remember that you are powerful and that the power is within you. So yeah, after
Oh, that was
you
really
want me
good. Yeah, no, that was awesome. I was like, okay, like I'm in the zone here. This is cool. And I would, to just put a pause for a second, I would 100% agree with you. I think the I find, not to point blame at anything, but essentially we get conditioned just in general that we are helpless and that we can't do these things. And there's a lot of different factors bringing that up. But like you said, when you realize it's like, no, you have to take the choice. You have to be willing and own it. I had another guy on the show here that went through AA and did all that, and he really enjoyed it. And he thought it was an amazing process, which is wonderful. But he said the exact same. He said something very similar, just that like it's up to you. You have to do it. And he found the community was super helpful, and having people around him that were on that same journey was so powerful. So I think that's wonderful. So not to stop your on the roll there, but so what are a few other healing modalities you explore and you train and help people with now?
Yeah, so while I was doing the Kembo, I was also working with Neuroptimal, and I didn't dive into it too much. I
Hmm.
ended up purchasing Neuroptimal machine about a year after the whole transition that I had, and then I really started to put more time into Neuroptimal. And what I noticed with Neuroptimal neurofeedback, so I'll explain what that is first. Neuroptimal neurofeedback is basically a mirror for the brain, so the brain can see itself. So the brain is so advanced that it doesn't need to be poked, prodded, or told what to do or controlled. It's like this supercomputer. And so once it can see itself, it can adapt and self-regulate and rewire. And
Hmm.
so yeah, it's really, really simple. There's no known side effects to Neuroptimal as well, which is a bonus. And for me, I really struggled with my whole life. I didn't realize that I was autistic. I was the high functioning autistic in the autistic person in the world, and
Mm.
so I would always walk on my tippy toes. I would, shake back and forth. My eyes would roll up my head. I wasn't able to have eye contact or conversations. I wasn't able to learn, read, write, comprehend very well. I was able to do that stuff enough to mask myself,
Yeah.
but so that's why I was a high functioning autistic person. So Neuroptimal really helped me with that mind body connection, really allowing for
Mm.
stuff to come on. And also combined with the Neuroptimal, I was also doing a lot of self mastery, and that is
Mm.
key to any modality that you are doing. Never place all of your healings on one thing. In fact,
Mm.
we are all so unique that so many different modalities are really what makes us really find more of who we are in ourselves.
Yeah.
So it's really about finding what works for you, and also coming in from a conscious place of choosing what works from you instead of being told something might work for you. Really going inwards and seeing if your body is giving you an F yes. If your
Mm.
body's giving you an F yes, yeah, play with it, try it, attempt it. If it's not, then tune into what else might work for you, because neurooptimal neurofeedback isn't for everyone. But if you've had a lot of trauma to the brain, I was also in a car accident where I was thrown 100 feet from a car, and so
Whoa.
that gave me severe insomnia. So when
Whoa.
I along with other things as well. And so with the severe insomnia, I've done so many different things that have really helped me to become an excellent sleeper, which I am at
Hmm.
now, which is
Hmm.
incredible. Like I never thought this day would happen. And Neuroptimal actually got me from going from 1 hour of broken sleep a night every night to
Whoa.
about 5 or 6 hours of sleep.
Wow.
Then what I did is I cut out coffee.
Mm.
Coffee is a stimulant, it's a drug, it's an activator, and our bodies, I'd been drinking coffee my whole life. I was addicted to coffee. It was one of my other addictions, caffeine, like after all
Just
the other ones.
It's just more socially acceptable, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And as one of my good friends always likes to say, you're borrowing from the future. You're borrowing energy from the future, and that's going to catch up with you. And so for me, I would always crash, but then I was always sensitive to sleeping, and that cutting out coffee and turning to matcha really allowed for me to gain an extra 1 hour of sleep every night, sometimes up to two,
That's a lot.
depending on
It's a
weight,
big
which is a
gain.
lot. It actually
Yeah, it's a
adds
big
up to
gain.
that 5 hours. And then the other thing that I did that really helped me with my insomnia, I also create activation. So I create clearing energy from your body. So being what people might like to call an empath, which I don't resonate with that word necessarily anymore. It's more like I am sensitive to energy. I can take on other people's energy if I'm not 100% present in the moment.
Hmm.
If if my mind wanders even for a second, that's a gateway for me to take on other people's energy.
Hmm.
There's lots of other things of how you can take on energy. That's just one example. But so it does happen. And so using this activation to clear yourself and rid yourself of any energies that you absorb throughout the day um, has been like the exact antidote that I needed. It was the exact key, the exact medicine that I needed for what I was going through. And all those combined has really helped me with my insomnia. So,
Well, you know what?
yeah.
That's there's so much there that I want to unpack, and I love your first of all, I love your energy and your passion behind it. Clearly is important to you because I could see how excited you got when you're talking about it and how your body's involved. And you're like, this is important. And again, you've went on this journey, which is so amazing. And I feel like, again, everybody's story is different, but we can always see pieces of ourselves in someone's story. So, for example, I've never been to AA, so that doesn't resonate with me. But having injuries, okay, I know what that's like. Having sleep issues, yep, I've been there. So my point is like you've been through a lot of shit, right? And it's when you look back at it, you can blame and be upset and angry. But what you've done, and it's essentially what my message and what I've been trying to help people with and just help them understand is like you can use that as the pointing the blame, or you can turn that into a superpower, or you can turn that into something wonderful. And it sounds like you're doing that. And I know the journey never ends. It's just always continuing, but it sounds like you're really like pushing for that and that you're putting a lot of your effort and energy into that, which is so wonderful. So there's a lot
I
here I
would like to
want to,
share something if I can.
yeah, yeah, for sure. Go ahead.
Yeah, but I love that you brought that up because your pain, all the traumas that you've been through are your superpowers. On
Yep.
the other end of that trauma, when you heal from it, it's such a gift. There's so many
Yep.
gifts in there. And when I
Yep.
think about the childhood trauma that I went through, I think about all of the beauty that comes from it, all of the abilities to the powerful way that I healed myself. I emanate this energy into the world, and
Mm,
just by being myself, I'm automatically raising the vibrations wherever I go. And there's like a huge list that goes with that as well, and it really is your gift. It's your
yep.
powerful thing. If you're struggling out there, if you've been through a lot, know that you chose this life. Being working in the Akashic records, you choose all of the experiences that you've gone through because you knew you could overcome them. You knew you could be the person that
Mm,
would stop the lineage pain and trauma. You knew that you could do that, and so you come into these lives and you transmute it in the best way that you can. But yeah, it's really about this self journey of inner healing, and then in that, the awakening of your gifts, the awakening of your power, your energy, your soul right, your soul birth.
mhm.
Yeah, I felt called
Absolutely.
to share that.
No, I think that's so wonderful. And I would agree with you. It's can you, I would say, is it can you change the story? Can you look at it from a different perspective? Because as soon as you can do that, or if you can step away, look at it from a bird's eye view, it's like being lost in a maze. Well, I have no idea where I'm going if I'm in this maze and there's problems and there's a wall and there's a wall and everywhere I turn there's a wall. And it's like, right, of course. But if you can get that bird's eye view, if you can get that high ground. Jocko Willens talks about that. It's talking about having the high ground being the emotional, not just physical high ground, but the emotional high ground, right? A place of gratitude, place of love, and for just love and care for yourself, you're going to get a better perspective. You're going to
Yeah.
be able to
And
see it and go, oh, I just have to do this, this, and this, and I'm there. And it's like, yeah, but you have to be able to raise yourself up. So, and again, he's somebody that I find is a nice. I brought that analogy because it's a nice way to take then this energy and kind of what you're doing and just make it palatable for anybody. And that's truly my message. I want to take stuff that you're doing and be like, how can anybody that's stuck and just feeling down, how can anybody go, oh, that actually makes sense? And they do. That's why, not that I support war, but the point, but in war, that's why having the high ground is an advantage. You can see everything. So,
hmm,
so can you to address those things, can you have a higher emotional state
hmm.
of
And stepping out
gratitude,
of
happiness?
Yeah, and stepping out of victim and stepping into
No.
victor is really about stepping out of 3D and stepping into 4D,
Hmm.
5D.
Hmm.
We really stop playing those lower games, which is the you did this to me, or this
Yeah.
experience is taking me down and blah, blah, blah. If it's like, no, this is happening for me, it
Yeah.
really puts into a different way of living. And, the universe is going to mirror that to you. So it's so
Mhm.
important. And the power of pause is one of the most greatest gifts. Is we can just pause for a second and really feel the feelings that are coming up when we are in a triggered state or when we are in a state where we feel stuck and we're just like, okay, can we just feel? Can we
Yeah.
really be present with feelings in our body? And speaking from my experience, when I was younger, I never wanted to be in my body. I wanted to do
Yeah.
everything outside of anything that would take me out of this now moment. It was like
Yeah.
whatever it is, I don't want to feel. I don't want to be here.
Yeah.
And this is
Distract.
where yeah, and this is where all the healing happens when we can self validate instead of seeking for others to validate for us. The
Hmm.
people pleaser, stuff like
Yes.
that. We come into ourselves and we're like, Steffi, I love you. You're doing just great. Just
Hmm.
breathe. You got this. That self validation. It's like the parenting that we never got when we were younger.
Hmm.
That type of stuff we can
Yeah.
do to ourselves.
Yes.
We can do this right now. We can do it
Mhm.
whenever we're in a triggered state, and that is the key moment to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I 100% agree. I think, well, there's two things I want to go on there, and then I want to move a little bit different direction or just to recap some things. But yeah, if you're able to just look at yourself and your situation with just gratitude. I always come back to because I find it's like I get called my cheat code. It's like this is just a button when I'm like, shit's going sideways. I don't know what's going on. I feel lost. If I just hit this button, I just mash it a bunch. And I just keep mashing this button like a video game when you're a kid and you're like, and I'm just gonna hammer away at this button. It sounds ridiculous, but anybody that grew up with video games or computer games knows what I'm talking about. When you just hit that button,
Yeah.
just the point is, it's like it's just an easy way to like, right, I'm gonna get that elevated state again, or I'm gonna take the high ground. I'm gonna just breathe. I'm gonna clear my mind from all that other crap that's going on. I'm just gonna focus on this thing. And then you are able to deal with that. And then, as you said there, I want to just add, when you have those moments where these feelings that aren't fun come up, I always say it's like those are one, you need those moments because if every moment you've ever had in your life, hypothetically, was wonderful, well, now that's just your baseline and that's not wonderful anymore. So you
Yeah.
actually do need those low moments. So I say feel them. And oh my God, what was his name? The gym guy, Alex Hermosi talks about this. It's just when you're given permission to feel shitty, you stop feeling shitty. You're like, oh, you're right, I can't feel shitty. And then you're like, oh,
Yeah.
well, oh, it's actually not as you kind of just accept it and are able to move through it. So you need those lows because then the highs feel that much better. And yeah, and it allows you to, I think, I said you experience that range of emotions, which we need. And that's the whole purpose of this podcast, is to be able to handle those and to be able to have that flexibility. And as I like to use fitness, right? Fitness is to be able to handle things when they come your way, when life throws these things at you, right? What tools and how do you have the, emotional strength, emotional fitness to be able to roll with it?
Yeah,
So,
and that's the definition of a light worker as well, is like someone who's not all light, but someone who actually goes to the darkness, who's going through problems, transmutes it to the light.
mm,
That is a light worker.
mhm,
So yeah.
absolutely. So, because I always like people to resonate with anybody I'm speaking with. And you went over just talking about your history. Do you want to maybe take a few minutes and just recap, because you rapid fire these things like they were nothing. And I was going to go, wait, what? You did what? So you were in a car accident and you were thrown 100 feet?
Yeah, 100 feet. Yeah.
Oh
And
my God.
I was unconscious, but I somehow landed on my foot. And the surgeon called my mother and told her that I was paralyzed because he'd never seen anybody fly that far, let alone live, not be paralyzed. And so for
Oh my
24 hours,
God.
she thought I was paralyzed, and I wasn't. My whole foot was shoved up my leg. Every bone was crumpled. I was in a cast for on and off for about 4 years. But yeah, it was wild. I walk great
Oh,
now, and yeah,
wow.
it was
Okay.
actually greatest things that happened to me, because that was the moment where I started to heal. I
Yeah.
started to I was forced to tell my childhood story for the first time, because I was told that if you have a bad past, it would help. It would help with certain things. So
Totally. Well, you're jumping the gun a little bit. No, just kidding. You're not jumping the gun. But I love that you said that it was not, and that's kind of the point of some of these stories I find, is it's the spark that sets
yeah,
you on your journey to a different life that you actually really wanted. And sometimes I say it's like, that's why I used to call the podcast Kicking the Junk, but it's just the idea that like you have these moments where it's just like universe situation, whatever, it doesn't matter, but you get just absolutely rocked and you're like, oh my God, what do I do? Like, how am I going to survive this? But then on the other side of that is this one like amazing, wonderful version of yourself that's better and stronger and more resilient and can handle life much better. So he said you were in a car accident, drug addiction. Is that right?
yeah,
Okay. Alcohol addiction,
alcohol, bulimia.
bulimia. Wow. So eating disorders. So
Mhm.
any other any other key struggles that you've been through that might
Yeah.
resonate with other people?
I mean, I escaped from a cult as a child. So
Whoa.
I Yeah, I had a lot of trauma from that. I was sent to a cult, and I escaped when I was 14. And a
Holy.
lot of people probably know of this cult, but it's a bit different than the places that you go to. It was actually Scientology, and I
Okay.
was sent out to the Sea Org, which is in Florida. It's a base there,
Mhm.
and there was so much trauma that happened there. My sister was raped. My other sister almost died. She got her autoimmune disorder. We were overworked 18 hours a day. Basically, I was on my hands and knees cleaning with a toothbrush, ovens, and like garbage bins and stuff like that. And I had to hold my head down and say yes sir, no sir, and was talked down to. I didn't have I was ripped of all my rights. We had security guards following us around. We were locked up. We weren't allowed to leave or communicate to the outside world. It is no joke there. People actually go missing there. There is like it's insane. I escaped, and I was really really grateful for that. But
Wow.
another thing, which I think a lot of people aren't going to understand this, but this is really important as well, is that they forced us to sign a billion-year contract. And most people don't really understand what that means. But when I escaped from this place, I immediately had deep dark cravings in me. I mean, they were the deepest cravings I'd ever had. Like it was like nothing could feel my soul. And I many years later, I prayed. I was binge drinking 3 days in a row, twice a week. And I prayed. I got on my hands and knees and I prayed for the second time in my life. The first time was the car accident. The second time I prayed and I received an answer, shaman. And so I Googled all these shamans, and Crystal Lynn on West Broadway in Vancouver. I found her and I went to go see her, and I went to all these chakra cleanings. Nothing happened. And at the very end of her list, it was extraction. And I
Mm.
didn't understand what that had meant. And I was like, sure, like let's go. And so I did it, and I'm laying on her table, and my entire body was like, I went with like tingles, like almost felt like kind of like sharp needles or knives or something like that, like super tingles. And then I had this dark, coarse sound that came out of my throat. My eyelids were closed, and the entire room color changed colors, even with my eyelids closed. So it was like a light, and then it went black. And then this black thing shot out of me. And the weird thing is that every night after that happened, that black thing came back into my body and I could see it. And so I went to another person. Somebody recommended to me this psychic. And I went to go see this psychic. And the first thing that she said to me was, "What happened to you when you were 14?" And I said, "Well,
Mm.
I from a cult." And she said, "Well, did you sign anything there?" And I said, "Yes, I did. I signed a billion-year contract." And so she said that they attached a demonic entity to me, and that thing had been attached to me the entire time. My Ever since I left that place, I had torturous nightmares. I had deep dark cravings. My sister's the same thing, but they're in their own unique ways. Theirs weren't the exact same as mine. But it's wild to think about that stuff, and that stuff is legit. So the activations that I started creating, I created a clearing contracts activation, and holy, was that powerful, like clearing those contracts from my body as well. And there's many other steps that I did too, but I don't want to jump the gun. I know there's a
No, no,
lot
that's okay. But
in there.
I've heard, to be honest, it's hard to hear that story because I like to, when I hear people's stories and I like talk to them, I put myself there as best I can to be like, okay, I'm Stephanie and I'm scrub, and I'm like, it's honestly like it makes me want to throw up hearing about that. It's actually it's crazy. And the insane part was it happened and it was real. This isn't a movie. First of all, thank you for sharing, I guess, on that too. I wouldn't want my enemies, not to have enemies, but I wouldn't want anybody to go through something like that because that's crazy and insane. And the fact that you're still here is a testament to your will, your strength, and more importantly, the message I want to hit home is the power of overcoming, right? And the power of that will to want better for yourself and to change. So, that truly is amazing. And that, to be honest, I've never heard anything like that before. Um, and that's a whole topic we can like dive down, but
Yeah.
there's a lot of like, but I think you really made some good points there. And just I'm trying to think of I can't even relate it to anything that I've experienced, to be honest with you. I can't. I'm trying my best to think of something, but I can't.
Well, it's just about abandonment, neglect. When we
Right.
can on that, I think a lot of people have been abandoned from their parents and been
Totally.
neglected certain ways, or been abused.
Yeah.
It's
Yep.
that type of abuse as a child is so it ingrains into your body and your essence and your soul, and you believe those things that you were taught, that you were told. And it's the undoing of that. And I think a lot of people can relate with that in their own family households. I mean, it might not be as extreme, but it's still there. It's
Yeah.
the same.
Totally. I think that you're exactly hit there as the abandonment and abuse. And here's the thing, sometimes it shows up in different ways. It's not this clear cookie cutter version that we all think it might be. It's different ways. Sometimes it's subtle, sometimes it's actual physical abuse, sometimes it's neglect, sometimes it's incidental, unconscious neglect
Mm.
where you have a parent that's trying to do their best and it's a single parent and they have two or three kids trying to take care of the house, but they have to work four jobs and they're just not there because they can't be there. right?
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
sometimes you even get that. Again, it's not the obviously it's not what you went through, but I think that the message I want other people to understand, and we're got lots we want to go over still, but is that if you can overcome something like that,
Yeah.
right? Anybody else can. And I don't mean to like I'm not trying to like say that you're not. It's just that like that's what I'm hearing is like if you can, then it's like right, other
I
people
was
can
so
as well.
like if I can, anyone can. Like I really want that to sink in.
Yeah,
Absolutely. If I can do it, anyone can do it. I
right,
was functional. Like it was just so well, but that dysfunction was just because there's unhealed trauma. There's
right,
just things I needed to work on. That's all that it is.
totally. And again, we're not talking about one major thing or two
Mhm.
major things. We're talking about like truly, yeah, like you got like let's put it this way, I've had lots of different people on the show, and they most of the time the stuff they're dealing with is one of those things. And you got the whole gambit, Stephanie.
I got it.
You checked by any boxes that we're going there, we're going there. I'm just gonna get them all. And that way,
Yeah.
but not to make light of it, but it's I mean, one, I guess you have to smile at it now, but how much more empathy do you have for people when they come to you and they're, hey, I need help? Or how much
Mhm.
more wisdom
Absolutely.
and background, and not to mention the drive you had to find not just one modality, but
Mhm.
a range of modalities that can help you become a better person. So,
Yeah. And I do want to mention something. I was very different from my sisters as well. That's why I know that I'm a high functioning autistic person. I did get a test from my doctor around that. But yeah, I was very different from my sisters. So my sisters, even though they went through the same traumas as me, I was very different in that aspect.
mhm,
Without being able to properly read, write, speak, like all of those functions. So
well, so I guess on that, then what do you think you did, or what do you think was different between you and them, and how you handled your experiences and how they did or didn't handle their experiences? And again, it's not to
you
talk bad about anybody, but what was just think like maybe, I think I had this, or maybe I had more drive, or maybe something.
we all had different things and we all
Right.
handled it with the hood. And my sisters are definitely on their own journey. And
Yeah.
uh, yeah, we are all kind of just thrown out and just, how to figure it out on your own type of
Yeah.
deal. And we all on that journey on our own and had to just we all kind of separated from each other as well. Our family was just really broken and
Mm-hmm.
we all went on our own inner journey. And so
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's all
Very
I'll
cool.
share.
No, no, that's totally fine. So that was definitely your kicked in the junk moment for sure. So, which is sounds like there is a few one of the something I want to kind of dive back into because you're talking about some of the modalities you do. What is your favorite part of the work you're doing now with people?
The response that they give to me after they receive, like after they do the thing, like it's like they receive the activation or they follow along with something that they booked from me, and they're
Mhm.
like blown from it. I think that feeling of knowing that I made such a powerful impact to someone who is really needing it or who's really struggling
Mhm.
is one of the gifts.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I like that. And it's a way to, I always think of it, it's a way to turn, like I said, that trauma into a gift. And now a gift, something that you can give to others,
Exactly.
right? And be able to almost sometimes I like to think like this. It's almost like, no, no, you, the forces that be, the people that, not to point blame, but just you're not going to win, is what it is. It's like, no, no, I'm not letting you guys win. I'm not letting, whoever did this, whatever, like I'm owning my own life and I get to choose the outcome, not this past trauma, not
Mhm.
all these, not the car accident, not the alcohol or the drinking or the, all these like crazy things that you've been through and overcome. You're
Mhm.
getting to be the victor in that, like you said earlier, which is so wonderful.
Mhm. Yeah.
So when I want to talk a little bit about, well, quite a few things actually, because we got a bunch we can dive into, which is awesome. When you talk about emotional fitness and being able to handle life's stressors, and what does that mean to you? And what are some things you do to practice that?
Feeling is the number
Oh,
one way to,
okay.
when you are emotionally stressed, you're stressed about something, you're triggered. It's like when we go inwards and we go into this state of feeling and acknowledging the situation is happening. So
Mm,
it's like oftentimes we don't acknowledge it and we're kind of just up in wherever land. It's like once we acknowledge it, we can work with it. So we acknowledge the situation, we feel the feelings, we take responsibility for it coming into our field. And I
mm,
think a lot of people don't do that. It's like we like to think that everything is happening to us, but when we really step into, like I was saying before, everything is happening for you. Why is this coming into your field? And it doesn't have to be so much logic around it. It's more like, okay, yeah, this is happening for me and I understand. And yeah, it's really about sinking in and feeling. And also, one of the things that I love to do multiple things. So like breath work is
mhm.
excellent for me, specifically
Totally.
something called passive breath work.
Mhm.
And I used to do all the forms of breath work, but I found that passive breath is my number one go-to. And passive breath is really about slow inhales for the count of 20 or 30 seconds and slow exhales for the count of 20 or 30 seconds, as if you're breathing in through a straw or
Oh,
exhaling through.
wow.
And so
Cool.
what this does is it allows you to sink fully into the body and being present with the energy. So you're not forcefully pushing out the energies, but you're actually learning to acknowledge and feel everything going on in your body.
Mm,
And it helps you to just fully sink in. And I actually learned this modality through someone called Jason Estes through MTVO, which
mhm.
is another modality, another place that I went to that I is all about spiritual mastery that I would 100% recommend to anyone as well. And so, yeah, I learned this modality through them, and it really, really helps me. So that's one of my go-to things to helping with whenever I want to process energy, because essentially we want to process the energy that's going on in us.
Mhm.
And that might mean also like a static dance, shaking it out of your body.
Yeah.
Another thing is working on the childhood wound that's coming up. If there's a childhood wound that's associated with that thing, working on that childhood wound, because we want to clear that where it's coming from. Otherwise, the trauma that's coming into your field is just going to keep repeating.
I love that you brought up breath work because that's something that I find is a very low-hanging fruit. It's a very, I think anybody, whether you're in the fitness journey, if you're in the healing, it's a very all-encompassing modality and a nice gateway, if you will, to other areas to become emotionally fit. And
Mm-hmm.
it's something that I've been practicing a lot. It's definitely a really good way, like you said, to become present. I think
Mm-hmm.
that is the most important thing you can have in your life is presence, because why wouldn't you want to be present for your own life? And then when you can be present for your own life, you can show up for others and be present. A good analogy I give is like when you talk to people about like some of the best moments in their life, and they'll tell you, oh, it was, maybe they were at some sporting event, they got to watch this live event and it was crazy, or they went in Mexico and they saw these like cool things, and all of them, they were present.
Mm-hmm.
Very few of them were like, oh yeah, it was that time when I watched that movie in front of her and we sat there and watched TV for 4 hours. It was like, no, like you're not really like, because you're checked out. And nothing against movies, I do love movies, but there's a time and place. So my point is, some of the best memories are when you're present. And what a great way to create more good memories is by being more present and
Yeah,
learning.
and to add to that, totally, the more source energy that you can channel through you. So any modalities that open up your crown chakra that allow for source to naturally flow through, like breath work,
Mhm.
it is a powerful way, because source, just like presence, is one of the greatest healers. Once we allow for more of that source energy to start channeling through us, where source is, it dissolves density in our
Mhm.
bodies, then it really is a powerful game changer. So any modalities that really help you to be more present and to have more source
Yep.
coming through, do it. And yeah, just really finding what works for you really in this journey.
Totally. So when you say source energy, because I understand what you mean, would there be another way to explain that to, like I said, somebody on the outside listening, and that's just like, hey, well, like I feel, I have these things in my life now and I had to address them. Should I see a therapist, whatever? And then they hear source energy healing, and it's like a good example is like 3 years ago, I'd been like, this chick's crazy, I'm out of here, right? Or like, I don't want to hear this guy talk about that. What would be another way to describe that to somebody who's on the outside looking in?
Source is really what we're all connected to. And it really is about the more present that you be, the more you open up your own source channel, the thing that you're connected to that's feeding you with divine energy. It's a different form of energy in comparison to food. Most people are dependent on food to fill them with
Mhm.
source energy. I still love food, don't get me wrong, but source is a whole nother energy that you're feeding off of. That's why when you go into fasting, for example, on day 4 of no food, you plug into a different energy. And that's why people say, oh, I have more energy on day 4 or whatever it is. Like, I
Mhm.
don't know why it doesn't make any sense. You're tapping into a different form of energy. And that source energy is infinite. It's limitless. It's
Mhm.
something that we plug into and we can be source. We are source. It's where we're from. And so when, for example, like even Akashic Records, that was the
Yeah.
first time that I tapped into source. So Akashic Records is something that I also train others to tap into. I'm also a facilitator. I'm a reader in the department as well. And
Mhm.
so when I first started to tap into Akashic Records, that was my first time where I really got to know source energy. And so Akashic Records is our soul library. Here we can access past lives, we can access guidance for what's wanting to come through, for feeling blocked or stuck, or like all of that stuff. Whatever it is, we can receive divine guidance from our source library that we have that's connected to us in all of our lifetimes. So that when I first started to channel the Akashic Records, I literally felt like I had gold liquid energy coming into my crown. Like
Mhm.
it was wild. And then after that, I started to notice, like, because then I'd already opened up this portal, I started to notice which modalities really worked, like breath work or certain modalities where that I could feel it opening up. Even
Mhm.
sometimes it was small amounts, sometimes it was larger amounts, but I could feel it. And it was like, wow, like this is incredible. Not only can you plug into source with Akashic Records, but all of these little things that you're doing, day-to-day things that you feel better after you do, you're actually plugging into source.
Mhm.
And it's most people might not feel it. They might not know that they are because they don't fully have their crowns open up yet. The chakra on top of your head. Most
Mhm.
people know what that is. I'm assuming people are like me and that they know the chakras and
I
stuff
always
like
assume
that.
people don't. But you know what? I had a really good analogy that came to mind when it comes to source energy, because I do understand it. I do know I've felt it. Because I've gone through the meditation and all this sort of, and because I'm practicing meditation for 7 years now daily. Yeah, I don't know, a long time. Anyway, um, but maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the idea of having an epiphany where you're like, oh, and all of a sudden, boom, you have this like energy and you're like, oh my God, this is how I solve this problem. And this, and this, and this, and this. And this is how I'm going to do this. And all of a sudden you get this like burst of energy over just a thought or this, whatever. This all of a sudden you get this wave of emotions of excitement and boom, you're off and you're going, and or being in the zone. I'd say a good example of that too, from like an athlete standpoint, is you're exhausted, you're playing football, whatever sport you're playing, and you're exhausted, but all of a sudden you have the ball and now you have a chance to win and do this amazing thing. And again, you can say it's adrenaline, it's all this too, but also you get this like rush of energy that you're like, that I didn't have that a few moments ago, but we kind of brought our team up. And I would say that you're tapping into that. You're tapping
Yeah.
into it a little bit. And again, because I'm trying to think, how can I always like to bring it back to just as many people as I possibly can. So, it's that moment where you're in the zone even, and where you're just like, I can't be stopped. I'm in the zone and I feel so good. And it's not about like putting something out, just like I just can't be stopped. I'm a force to be reckoned with. And even when you're exhausted and tired and have, you need water, you need food, you need all these things, but also boom, you have this. So that would be
Yeah.
my kind of definition of it. And then people everybody knows epiphanies, like I said before.
Yeah, I love that you said that because I think a lot of people don't realize that they're channeling, but in their own unique way.
Yeah.
You can channel in whenever you're in the zone. It's like that's a
Hmm.
state of channeling, and you're just
Hmm.
bringing source into you. And so I love that you brought that up. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's just looking at it from a different perspective,
Mhm.
right? Which is so wonderful. I want to dive into, well, again, we keep talking about that because there's so much there, but I do want to touch on you brought up childhood wounds. Now, this is a tough one because I find so many people are closed off, and because we don't know any better. And sometimes it's like they know it's there and they don't want to talk about it. But what would be a first good step then? And there's gonna be a few questions in this line of how to see if you have childhood wounds and what are some like common ones that you've come across.
I think if you're asking that question, you already know that there's childhood wounds.
Well, I know
um,
that, but or but
but
rather, what does
no,
that show up like in somebody who doesn't know, but you can, maybe you go, oh, I can see this, but they might not be aware of it.
yeah, so triggers are a perfect example of, a core wound. When we get
Hmm.
triggered, it's that triggering energy that happens in us, that need, like that something kind of comes over you. There's a trigger, there's a core wound. All
Hmm.
triggers are core wounds. And once we work on clearing wounds
Hmm.
from core, from the
Yep.
source, we can begin to transmute those triggers and clear those triggers from our field. It is
Right.
hard work and it does take a lot of practice and dedication and will, but it is possible. I used to be a trigger bomb, not around public. I was
Oh,
very hidden. I was
yeah.
really hidden. Like as soon as I would get home, I would go into this frantic, like crazy state. I would literally wake up in the middle of the night. If I'd fallen asleep, this is before my car accident, I'd wake up in the middle of the night screaming from a trigger. Like I would just be like, I would be in full frantic trigger. And
Hmm.
so, and not only that, anything to do with school or around my family, like very, very triggered. And so, um, even around how I acted towards people or how I was towards people. And so I was living in a completely hidden life. I had this very different life and very scared and fearful. And so I had to work on a lot of triggers.
Hmm.
And I rarely get triggered. Of course, new ones always present themselves, and but I handle them differently now. I work with them differently now. Sometimes I can forget, like I created this whole clearing trauma from the source template. And sometimes I can forget it because what happens when you are triggered is you go back into that 5-year-old self where
Hmm.
that trauma actually happened. So you forget your tools. You
Hmm.
forget how to you don't have all the same wisdom that you have now. And you go back into that 5-year-old self and you start screaming and you go into like this temper tantrum and that's it's like, oh my gosh, I don't know what happened to me there, like what happened. And it's like
Hmm.
you were just activated in a trauma. And
Yeah.
what's happening is that it's like your soul is wanting you to know that there's a trauma that wants to be cleared from your field. That's all it is. It's like a pinpoint. It's like, here it is.
Here's the problem. Yeah. Yeah. I was like the analogy of like an engine light. It's like, hey, there's a problem going on. And unfortunately, it's not fun or sexy or glamorous to heal trauma, to heal problems, to go after these past events and to try to really do your absolute best to bring presence and feel and do the work there. Um, but it's necessary. And I give trigger is such a funny word because it sounds super like
Triggering.
yeah, it's just kind of like, man, it just sounds easy. But a good a good analogy of one, or even just a good example of one for myself that I know is, or maybe to put a different spin on it, is it's like you go from you just your state changes instantly. And you're like, why am I like angry now? Like, what is going on? I know for myself, and it's me and my wife talk about it, and I don't get like mad at anybody specifically, but I know if I like hit my head, it's like I go from like I'm like, oh yeah, I'm okay, like happy, whatever, until like instant, like, oh my God, I want to rage out right now. And I'm trying to, and it's just like certain areas, and it's like it's and I know like, hey, I'll breathe and I work, I'm okay, and this, and this, but it's a good example for anybody that like that we have these things. We have these things that just set us off. And for me now, I think we're talking about it. That's something that I need to address and I need to dig into is okay, clearly like there's something evolving top of my head. Maybe it was with football because of running into people with my head and
Mm.
using it as a battering ram because it was effective. My
Yeah.
brain didn't like it. But it's just an example that like that's how they present themselves. And I
Mhm.
think that's the problem is like, oh, I don't get triggered. What do you mean I get triggered? I don't get triggered. And all of a sudden it's like,
Yeah.
oh, from you to you.
There's key.
Yeah, like
Sometimes.
okay, there's something there. So maybe we need to change the word. Maybe it's something that sets you off. It's something that just for whatever reason you just are all of a sudden in a bad mood. And it's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
right, why? And I've seen this before. People that get like possessive over interesting things that like don't really need to be possessive over.
Control.
Um, Getting really frustrated over things that other people don't get frustrated over. Good example there. So yeah, definitely we have them. I think, like you said, is bring awareness to them, and then I guess my next question then is if somebody listening now is like, well, maybe they're like me and they hit their head and they're just like instant, like, oh my God, why am I so upset? What are some like really easy ways to work through that and to address something like that?
Yeah, well, like I said earlier, it's really about acknowledging that it's happening. Acknowledgement is the first step, and then
Right.
feeling. If you want
Mm,
to do it quick, those two things are number one. Like it's so simple, but
yeah.
it's so powerful because when
Yep.
we acknowledge, we feel, and then not staying out of the mind as well. So the mind is going to go into a story. It's going to go into the story.
Mm,
This person did this. This thing didn't happen this way. They did this. But don't
yeah.
listen to the mind. Get out of the mind. Get into
Yeah.
the body. Get out of the mind. Get into the body. And that's easier said than done.
Oh yeah.
And but I would say that those are the number one things when we really want to, yeah, we really want to work on clearing this energy from our field. Once we dissolve this energy, then we can start to work on why this came into our field, what the
Mm,
root cause is. But the number one thing is really staying out of that victimhood. And
yeah.
I think that's for a lot of people. We don't want to believe that we're victims, because
Yep.
this person actually did this thing. But if you knew that on a soul level, you chose for that experience because you wanted to learn it, because you wanted to have more empathy, you wanted to understand it, you wanted
Mm,
to learn about it. So taking that responsibility, knowing that. And
mm,
another thing I want to mention too, getting a little bit off track, but not too much, is that it also might be a past life trauma. So if it's a
mm.
big trauma, there might actually be a past life trauma that's connected to it. Or it might actually be coming into your field because there's some sort of karma clearing that needs to happen. When we do something that we feel guilty about, if there's guilt that's associated with that thing's going to come back. So we can actually have more empathy around it and understanding.
Absolutely. And there's something that you said there, and I think is so critical is that you said not to worry about the why. Because then I think that's so big on I think of little scenarios. Well, I got fired. Why did I get fired? It's like, right, but then you're caught up in this, or you're caught up, oh, why did they break up with me? Why did this happen? Why did I get in this? And we get caught up in the why that you're not looking at the now and you're not looking at what could come from this. So you're putting all your energy into the past. And unfortunately, that's you're pulling from now to do that.
And it's more like, why is this happening for me?
Yeah. And you're right, the
So
language is big. Yeah.
yeah, it changes that. But yeah, why is this happening? Like, if there's a why, if this is happening to me, that changes the whole dialect.
Totally. Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. And you said it earlier. I thought it was really interesting. You talked about, not when you have that trigger, not going into the mind and not getting in your own head and following the story and just be with it. And it's so interesting 'cause it kind of ties into Dr. Joe Dispenza. I've done a lot of work with him, with his stuff, and it's so fascinating. But he talks about how the body can control the mind goes back and forth, and you have this relationship. A good example of that is the body remembers, right?
Mm.
And so if you, let's just go, you, for example, in your car accident, let's say whatever sounds you heard then, and you hear them again, and all of a sudden you get this trigger from your body, and you're like, but I'm not even there. That's your body and your nervous system remembering.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so what will happen though, and this is what he talks about, is how when you have that response, your body goes, oh my God, this is happening. You get this flood, the body produces, oh, well, I remember this experience. Here's the
Mhm.
emotions we're supposed to feel. And boop, and when you get all those emotions, they go up to your brain goes, oh, this emotion's tied with this memory. And then you start feeling it. So it's actually the body telling the brain what to feel now.
Mhm.
And so, like you said, is you can just stay here in this in your body and just feel it and go, no, this is not, there's nothing new, there's nothing old. It's just being accepting it, like you said, and feeling. And to again, I say it one more time for anybody that is just in this beginning this journey of like change, accept the feeling, sit with it, accept responsibility of it. Like there's no bad, there's no wrong. It's just accepting it.
Mhm.
And then
Yeah, the duality
yeah,
is I brought that up because it's not bad, it's not good, it just is.
it
And
just
that's
is.
yeah.
Yeah, it just is. And then not chasing the story that comes up because that's such a because then what happens is when you get the okay, well, let's say it's a slamming door. You've been in a bad relationship, and you and your ex or whoever it was would slam the doors all the time. Oh, and you get this shock, and you hear, and then boom, you get these emotions, and your head goes, well, I remember that, and then all of a sudden your brain goes, yeah, you're right. All those thoughts. Let's think about all those thoughts from way back when. Oh, that's going to produce more hormones and emotions that are going to make me feel it down here, and then you just get this cycle. And so a really good example is I had this recently actually, and I talked to my wife about this, Emily, and I was like, wow, this is fascinating. I actually was able to stop and catch it and feel it. We had some family stuff going on, with yeah, anyway, some family stuff and just a lot of like this tension that I was like, this is so unnecessary. But I was having like some like digestive stuff, and I was like, man, I just wasn't like food wasn't sitting well and whatever. And it was during that time, and it was when this kind of was all arising. But then the next day, I was like, hey, no, I'm over it. Like, meditate. I did all my stuff. I was focusing on gratitude. I was mashing that gratitude button because I didn't want to keep thinking about the same, playing the same stupid story in your head. Like, no, I dealt with it, moving on. So I was mashing the button. And then the next day, I started to feel, I was like, oh, my stomach again. But it was interesting because all of a sudden, as soon as I felt my stomach did this turning, and I was like, boom, all these thoughts of the previous stuff that I was like, nope, I don't need to think about this anymore. It's done. All came in my head. And I was like,
Mhm.
oh, huh, that's my body saying, hey, remember you have this feeling? Well, that feeling is associated with this memory. And then so I literally had to stop and have this like weird conversation in my own head while I was just like literally meditating and closing my eyes and breathing. I was just like, no, I don't want that story anymore. And like,
Mhm.
thank you. I'm like, okay, like, right, you remember that. So you did your job. Thank you in a weird like and again this is how I talk to myself. I'm not like I'm just like okay thanks buddy like that's cool. Okay, I want something different. What do I want different? Well, it's just helping me and thanks for helping me. I'm good now. I'm gonna think about something else. And that was it. And it was just like that simple, but it was a really I thought it was a really wonderful and easy scenario and story for anybody else listening to go like right, do I have these emotions that come up? Do I have these feelings that come up? And can you notice if there's thoughts that pop in your head one after another and see if
Mhm.
that trigger comes trigger there's the word again. But if you see if that happens in that order, because if so, well then it's something you can work on and something you can, like you said, feel, take responsibility. And then I would say the next is like, okay, now what do I want to focus on? Right? Where do I
Mhm.
want to put my attention? And can I let this pass and move on? Because once you've done that, I'm not sure if you listened to that episode before, but Barbara was talking about that is, and it's so funny that you said it because it ties into what she said was, yeah, feeling those emotions is how you avoid them from being stuck.
Mhm.
So when you stuff them down, and men historically are really good at this. So good job, guys, but we got to try something different if we want different.
Well, yeah.
because ultimately there's a time and place. Like, I
Yeah.
say that being like, if let's say you're in Mexico right now and there's an actual danger outside and we need to run and from a, I don't know, something, a wolf, bear, whatever. You can't stop and be like, oh, my feelings. It's like, no, you gotta let go. Like, now's the time to live and let's go and let's get out of here. But then
Yeah.
once you're safe, okay, now we need to feel those emotions. Now we need to utilize that. And I think it's understanding both, that both have value. There is a time to not feel.
Mhm.
And again, it's not never. It's just there's a time when you absolutely can't because you need to, something needs to be done. And there's a time to sit and feel and let it pass and let it move through.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just like animals, right? Like we look
Mhm.
towards animals, they'll
Yep.
run and
Yep.
then they get free, they'll
Yep.
shake. They
Yep.
get off. And that's how they
Exactly.
practice.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's a really good analogy there. And that's kind of I think is a really good message on this, is that like even with all this stuff that you've been through, you still can, there's a time again when you're a good example is when you're dealing with some of these things you dealt with when you're in rehab, there's certain times where you can feel it. There's other times where you're like, I just have to get up and do. I just have to
Yeah.
do, and I can't just sit here in my upsetness. And because sometimes that can happen, especially if you're somebody that has lived in victimhood,
Yeah.
or if you can, you sometimes you dive too far into that. And I know I have too, where I'm like, now I'm just being like, now I'm not being true to myself because now I'm just sitting here whining about this stuff. It's like, hey, I need to go back for myself. I need to go back to doing and having both, right? Having,
Hmm.
and I would say like the doing is the masculine energy and the feelings, the feminine energy, and utilizing both of them.
Yeah. And I would also say, never putting what you're going through on someone else. So if
Mm.
you have a lot of like anger coming up, it's like you can have a conversation with that person if you are at a state of peace. If you are at a state where you don't feel like you're going to
Yes.
throw that on that person, because once you do, karmically, the situation has to come back. And
Yeah.
not only that, it puts you in a lower state, puts you back into victimhood blame. And so we really want to go inward. So it's best sometimes to take a time out.
Yep.
If you don't like you can have a conversation with someone, take a time out. Say, you know what? I'm going through a lot right now. I need to process some energy. I'll be back in 5 minutes. And then go to the
Yes.
room and take a time out, do what you
Yep.
got to do. When you're feeling ready, have that conversation. Some people like to just have the conversation right away. And if they can do it with peace, with not putting blame, that's gold. But
Mhm.
for the average person, if you're triggered, you need to, speaking from my experience, I'm like, I just got to have a timeout.
Yeah. And you know what? There's nothing. It's a really good thing. And I think sometimes you get again people that are like, no, I need time. And unfortunately, sometimes their time can be 2 days. And it's like, okay, well, good examples in a relationship that doesn't work,
Yeah. Maybe
right?
like a
But
10 timeout.
yeah, but yeah, you exactly. It's going like, you know what? I'm getting fired up here. Like if you're noticed, and it's hard because sometimes, because the tough part is you have to notice yourself. So for example, if I, me and Emily, and again, we've never actually ever actually fought, thankfully, because we both recognize this and utilize this so often, is that like, right, like I'm really stressed out about something and I'm like really fired up about this. Like I need to meditate, or I'm gonna go do, we have a gym in our house, like I'm gonna do some ball slams, or I'm gonna
Yeah,
go like just like
exactly.
scream for 5, 10 minutes. Then we come
Yeah.
back and breathe. And then we can talk about how I feel without pointing blame. Because as soon as it's like any scenario, if you're pointing blame, well, now the other person gets defensive. And then you're
Mm.
just you're creating you're just creating a war zone.
The
Right.
power,
Truly.
yeah, the power of screaming into a pillow.
Yeah. Yeah. But truly, there's nothing wrong with that. So again, it's just taking that awareness. It's taking that, having presence in your own life to take a second and be like, you know what? I can't handle this work thing right now. This is like insane. Or if you're a coach and you're, let's say coaching the sports and you're like, these kids are crazy right now. Like I'm gonna lose my shit on them. Like, I'm gonna walk away for 5 minutes or just breathe. And like you said, come back to that breath work, like you talked about earlier. Come back to just breathing because breath controls emotions. Last advice for or tips or tools for anybody that is, like you said, looking to just make some steps, some baby steps, if you will, to their own healing journey. what would, and their own ability to handle life's crazy things that can happen for us, even though they seem not for us. But what are some ways that some things you can give that might help at somebody in that boat?
Well, a couple of things are coming through, but yeah, so right now we're going through some pretty wild times with it feels almost like our mind is splitting. So
Hmm.
it feels almost more chaotic than normal. So it's really about the more that you work on those chaotic feelings and thoughts, the more that you can anchor into your body, the more that you can change your life. And the
Hmm.
other thing, going inwards and
Hmm.
consciously change everything that you're doing. Don't do it because I said it. Don't do it
Yeah.
because the said it. Go inwards and learn to build those muscles of feeling what feels right for you, because
Mm.
what is right for you might not be what's right for me, and what's right for
Mhm.
me might not be right for you. So going inwards and really tuning into your own self, and I learned that the hard way for so long. And but that's the great thing, is that I now get to share it from an embodied place of wisdom of what
Mhm.
to do. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
And when you say what feels good for you, what would be, if somebody's never felt that, what is the feeling, or how would you describe that? I know how I would describe it. How would you describe that?
Question. So I would say that there's not resistance there. It feels light. It
Mm.
feels it feels calm. It doesn't feel forceful or controlling. Like it doesn't feel like
Mm.
I do this, but rather I want to do this.
Right.
This feels good. It's like when
Feels good.
we
Yeah.
scroll or like a neediness, like I need to, automatically your ego is speaking. There's a
Mm.
red flag there. It's you don't need to do anything.
Yeah.
You want to come from a place of want and desire.
Mhm. That's awesome. To be honest, I mean, you've said a lot of wonderful things so far, but that was, I think, probably the best one. And even just for myself, because I'm such a, my friends and my wife would say, "Oh, your superpowers you're doing," and I'm like, "Well, I just got to do it." So but it's interesting when I hear the kind of the opposite of like, right, is like, do I do it because I feel like I need to, or is it do it because I want to? And having
Mm.
that distinction, and like you said before, is sitting with it, I think is so critical. And that's something I think anybody can understand and resonate with is just like, right, why am I going to the gym? Do I need to or do I want to? Why am I and if you can want to, you're gonna get better results than, oh, if I need to, I have to, or oh, I gotta meditate. It's like, no, I want to meditate, or I want to do this, but like it's just that subtle distinction is that shift, right? That 2 millimeter shift that if you can go, the longer you go, that 2 millimeter shift makes a bigger difference. So
Yeah, and that need to is an obligation as well. It's an
yeah,
coming from a
yeah,
obligation, which
yeah,
is very deep. We want to be able to make sure that everything we do is out of choice.
totally. So before we wrap up here, how can people find you if they want to reach out and do, like you said, you're doing your past, I'm not going to say it right, so I'm not even going to attempt the Akashic Records. Is that right? Akashic Records. You're doing
Yeah.
womb and sexual healing, which is so fascinating. You're doing a lot of the neurooptimal neurofeedback, doing a lot of different types of training and healing and just ways to help people's lives. Just so wonderful. How can people reach you?
You can find me on Instagram. So my Instagram name is a little bit interesting, but it's Earth Rising, and it's dots in between each letter. So E dot, A dot, and then so on and so forth. So Earth Rising with dots in between the letters. And you can also reach out to me on my website, which is earthrising.life.
Awesome. Well, that's again, thank you so much for being on the episode and for sharing your a crazy but just filled story. And I'm sure anybody listening, some is going to be able to resonate with one or if not more of those experiences that you've had. And I love that you're on the other side of this now and that you're seeing that these things that at the time were so tough are now your gifts and your powers. And it's a really cool feeling. I can see the smile on your face just talking about it. You're like, oh yeah, that's why I'm doing this. And it's exciting and that's what I want for other people. I want them to realize that. And so thank you for sharing. Thank you for emanating that. And hopefully people will resonate with this. And again, I appreciate you doing the work you're doing. So thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate this. It was really great.
So thank you so much for listening to this episode. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day to do that. If you haven't yet, please subscribe. Please share, because that's what helps this podcast grow and be able to reach more people. And why wouldn't you want to share something like that with somebody if you really enjoyed it? If you haven't yet, I would also encourage you to go to lifepurposely.ca. My wonderful wife, Emily, sends out weekly content to help you improve your life and to think differently and to make wonderful changes that can impact your life forever. So thank you again for listening, and I'll catch you on the next episode.